All right, we're just going live with the Scrum a little bit early. Michael and I, we've been working on AgileBot. Yeah, so yes, it's nice to see that working. I mean, I guess looking back at it, you know, I don't know, the microservice itself has a number of things about it that make me uncomfortable in terms of, we've got this Hubot layer that makes things more kind of like that. It could be, we could have it, we could still have CoffeeScript with these kind of endpoints and whatever, and it could be Node Express. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I mean, we've basically got a number of layers of complexity on top of what's actually needed for the raw purposes of pinging these notifications out, which slows us down. I mean, you'd agree, right? It's
Well, yeah.
having those layers.
Redis issue, we lost like an hour.
Yeah. Of course, there are, issues that can be entertaining to solve. I mean, I'll probably blog about it tomorrow.
But you'll complain about the fact that it's caused by Hookup.
Well, I mean, I rather than complain about it, I will, pose the question. Was the approach that we took the right one? Maybe one should never question the approach one took. One should always just sort of like use one's intuition to just and take a series of decisions and not reflect on them. I mean, I think it's definitely. I feel it's a very satisfying feeling to take something, an arbitrary thing, and to wrestle with it, and to we've taken a legacy app that had some, I would say, questionable design decisions.
Right.
I mean, of course, questionable, and as much as it's great. It's good to experiment with things. When the app was being created, I think somebody, he had no idea to what extent we would necessarily rely on it, and it's perfectly reasonable for him to, he wanted to explore Hubot, he wanted to explore CoffeeScript. That's that's great. I mean, the interesting question for us, of course, then, in trying to maintain it is, to what extent do we stick with those initial design decisions, or do we try and, adjust them? And the common refrain, of course, I think as you and I discuss things, is tend to be on the, oh, we should rewrite this, and you're like, no, let's sort of stick with this and see if we can kind of keep it working.
Right.
And there's pros and cons to both sides.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like getting it to work with Express will be more than trivial.
Maybe.
It's like setting up an entirely new app.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean,
It would give us the power to decide all the decisions about what's in there and everything.
yeah. Yeah, and I don't fantasize that it's a total panacea. And there's different levels of changes. So,
And it's not just going to be like npm init and you're done.
No, I mean, I have made Node Express apps in the past and found it much easier to manage than Hubot.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I think it's, I think we've got, I want a whiteboard really. I mean, we've got this, there's the stack that it's in, which is the Node stack. And it's got, on top of it being Node, it's CoffeeScript and it's Hubot. And those are two kind of layers of indirection or bells and
Right.
whistles on top of the Node apps that I've worked with in the past, which have been
Right.
pure Express apps. And there's pros and cons for both of those things. I mean, we can now say yes, or we've successfully debugged the Hubot. We've got CoffeeScript experience there. The fact. I mean, particularly you came up with various elegant and excellent solutions to some of the problems in source mapping and so on. And I think having wrapped it in tests, that's a huge step forward. There are in term like clearly now we've got options going forward in that, right? One, we can make some more modifications to it, hoping that the tests will make that more reliable process of upgrading it. We could carry on doing those upgrades, see what happens. So certainly, having reached this point, it would seem insane to just say, right, oh no, we now need to change one of the layers of the stack. We should make some changes to hopefully improve the experience for the end user, and see how well our test framework and so on supports that.
Right. I mean, I don't know.
Go on.
Getting to where we are now, I spent a couple hours, like 2 hours, 3 hours, doing the upgrades and stuff, and getting the test to pass. And I'd say 3 hours, 4 hours. That's like a day.
Well,
My impression is that to roll that on its own is going to take much more than 3 or 4 hours.
Well, okay, go on.
You know,
Uh,
maybe I'm just wrong though. Maybe it wouldn't take like 40 hours.
I mean, I think that there's. I mean, I would say the 3-4 hours feels like a slight. I mean, maybe that's if you're thinking about all your time. I mean, I think there's we were both working on it. There was time spent getting it working on my system. There's the Redis thing. We spent 3 or 4 hours today, right?
Not today.
Yeah, we did.
Let's say we spent like an hour and a half, 2 hours today.
Oh, I guess we also did the project scope stuff. Yeah, maybe 2 hours today. So, but then
I'd say like 4 hours.
right, but you're saying so the actual process of wrapping the tests around it, and so was before, and there's the stuff that we've actually done in pairing sessions. So I mean, anyway, splitting hairs. But I agree. I mean, I think rolling an Express app and getting that all working, how many hours is that? And then there's also
Going forward, yeah.
but there's also well, I was going to say, I mean, there's this series of different options, which are maybe not, maybe who cares? I mean, but for me, it seems interesting that there's kind of, one thing that we could have done or could still do at some point in the future if we want to is migrate from CoffeeScript to JavaScript.
Right.
That with now they have the source maps, that seems less of a priority. Another thing would be the Hubot to Express, this setting up an Express app. Another thing would be, and it might be easier to get the debugging working in Express and Node pure thing, and that's a more common stack. Or there's writing it in Sinatra, which I'm fairly confident that I could do the entire thing with tests in half a day. And I think there's each of these things has there's multiple things, and anyway, we've got to where we are. So yeah, the independently of any back looking on what we might or should have done or what have you, it's certainly worth a few rounds of trying to change things to deliver stuff to the end user on this stack. Although,
I mean, what are our changes that we need, I guess, for the Agile bot?
Well, I think that the thing that I would love to see that is kind of a personal pet peeve of mine is if we just go screen share it, we sticks it there.
The full handing out URL you don't like, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would like to be able to use more sophisticated formatting in here. I guess I've already been able to tinker. I mean, I want to continue tinkering with the messages that are sent, and have a test suite to check that I'm not, reduce the chance of me permanently breaking it. What I would also like to have is this thing that we talked about, where that it can basically, support new projects as they come along without us necessarily having to configure it. So, if we create a new project on, or somebody needs to change channel, whatever, that we would have in website one a config to say, this is my Slack channel on a particular instance of Slack, and then it would just come through.
Right.
So doing those things, now that we have some degree of test coverage and so on, it seems like that they will probably be easier to do.
So if we want to eventually have that, we're going to have to obviously interface with Slackbot, right? Or a simpler thing is just to store the channel in website one, right? And instead of passing the project name, we can still pass the project name, but pass a channel ID, right?
Yeah.
And then every time that it looks up, like every time it's trying to find the channel for that project, it basically just uses the ID that was passed.
Right.
So that it's now agnostic about what channels map to what projects. But we would still need a mapping for like general and pairing and all that stuff, probably.
Well, I mean, what
I'm saying is like three, lines 3 through 20 would not be necessary anymore.
Well, in principle,
but maybe
go on.
21, 22, and 23 would stay.
Yeah, as a first step. I mean, however, all of this information
could be put into website one eventually. Yeah.
Right. Or even another thing would be just that we would have these channel names could be like in website one, we could be setting the channel names of the actual Slack channels, and then this thing would be, so the Slack bot would be doing a lookup on the Agile Ventures instance to work out what the channel ID was.
Right.
I guess the thing that ghouls me in some ways, though, is it seems like it just seems we've got this set up here where we're basically posting this stuff to an endpoint, right?
Right.
And like there's already a Slack endpoint. So like
post there, you're saying.
Why not just post directly there? And I mean, it's like I totally get the point about it's great to have a microservice architecture, and I think absolutely breaking these things out into separate stuff, fantastic. I think probably rather than pulling this logic into the website one code base, I might want to take that into a gem or something. But it seems like an odd place to have a separate service. The thing that we're doing with the project controller, because of the complexity of it and it being used by other people and so on, makes it feel like, oh yeah, that makes, like, if you're dividing up a monolith into microservices, right, you kind of want to take large chunks of it into the microservices. You don't want to just add a layer, and like, this was the thing, I think, when John, this was in local support, and he first got the idea of services, and he just created loads and loads of them, which is like, yes, it gives you all of this, flexibility, but flexibility is a big challenge in the first instance.
Right.
So, but maybe I am, maybe that's that. Like maybe I'm just barking up like entirely the wrong tree. Like, we've got an existing design decision that was made, right? You and I at least are now familiar with how it operates. If we change it, maybe that creates more problems than otherwise. Maybe this actually provides some flexibility and value that I just can't see at the moment. Um, but it's sort of like, uh, if we saw the situation where we had something like this, where you were kind of like doing this,
Mhm.
right, and it didn't seem to be adding any value, we would say, or there's like some minimal thing, there's like a log statement there or something, and we kind of go, yeah, actually, I don't think we need that log statement. We could just take that out. I mean, say that we had a microservice that all it did was you sent this to it, and then it sent it on to Slackbot.
Mhm.
It would seem like needless complexity, wouldn't it?
Right.
So the question is then, in terms of the overall system architecture, you know, uh, are there points at which you say, well, this complexity here is needless and it's getting in our way, so we remove it so that we can make faster progress. But anyway, I guess I should be blogging about it rather than boring you about it. Um,
Right. No, I mean, I understand what you're saying.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah. I mean, the bigger question in my mind, which is perhaps more important, is about the extent to which the whole I mean, like, was it yesterday we had the guy from Egypt who joined us in the Scrum, and he was able to. I mean, I don't know if he necessarily came in through the Slack or through the website, but he certainly was in the Slack. Um, that sort of thing is precisely what the whole framework is supposed to enable.
right.
But does it happen enough to make the thing with it? I mean, Joao was able to drop in on the end of our session, and then the Scrum. I think because of the Slack links, the Met Plus team is certainly using it and running, scrums and pairing sessions and so forth. Um,
I
but
mean,
again, go on.
are you doubting whether we should even have this functionality?
Um, I guess the question mark in my mind is not whether this functionality is useful. I think that it's got some utility. The question mark in my mind is from the big picture of all of Website One, AgileBot, Project Scope, everything. Where is the place that we focus our attention in order to maximize, the revenue to Agile Ventures?
Right.
Because while maintaining the community and the value I mean, we could just like all the obvious things, and yeah. So I mean, it's sort of, there are things like having put the work into the Agile bot, which we've done. I mean, that's it's, I think, purely as a sort of a developmental story, it's wonderful. It's rich. Sort of having that. There's blog posts, whether the recordings of the videos are actually of any use to anybody. I mean, that's a bigger question mark in my mind. Um, uh, it's potential. There's something there. There's sort of compost for learning and so on. But whether that will actually ever lead to, whether that will get taken up by anybody, I'm not sure. but it seems, having done it, it seems like, oh yes, we should now, yeah, make a few of those changes. Learn from it. It's great. I'm conflicted with. I mean, it's reasonable to switch tack for a second. The thing that we should be looking at is, I think there's, in the same way that we, having done the project thing, we came back to this and we cleared up. There's then some stuff. There's some clear up following on from the Stripe credit card thing that we were doing that should be cleared up. And then in my mind, it's like, is the Karma system, or is making the upgrade to premium member status more visible throughout the site, is that the kind of thing that's going to make a more significant difference, or is it actually doing pair programming on React and Elixir that's going to make all the difference?
Right.
And I think there's no simple answer to that. We just keep trying things and see what happens, really. So.
Yeah. So we could review, I mean, just quickly review what we would do tomorrow, or what potentially.
Yes, I think that's a good thing. I mean, I mentioned that, so my son has now got his phone and I'm not being interrupted. And so generally that's better. But yeah, so I've got Marcelo is talking about being available for a bit of pairing on local support tomorrow.
Oh.
He's saying 3 p.m. my time, which would be, and he's only going to be available for 45 minutes anyway. But so in principle, we could still do a couple of hours pairing or something before then.
You're pairing with him, just...
He's trying to do some refactoring on local support that he's struggling with. And I'm giving him a hand.
Okay.
He's signed up as a premium member. Hopefully to unblock him, hopefully to inspire him to want to pay for, more support. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm tempted to tomorrow to focus on clearing up any trailing ends from the Stripe credit card switching thing. I think there's a kind of some data manipulation we need to do, and then I have a feeling that when it fails, it will fail hard. So I think sensibly we would at least look at that before rushing into some next big project, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd work on, what are we working on? We were working on like something with the Stripe.
Yeah.
Letting people change their cards, right?
That's right. And we successfully enabled Raul to change his card.
But what do we need to do still? Oh, we need to...
But I mean, there's a trivial sort of thing, which is we need to, for the existing customers, we need to make sure that their correct ID is in the database.
Right.
So that's a manual thing.
And then there's also an automated thing where when you sign up,
right,
that already part of it.
So that's we could say as well, right, we've done this manually. For the next person who signs up, it's going to need to happen to enable their credit card. I mean, we could leave that as saying that's a manual thing we do in future. I mean, that's a thing we could do, is work on a feature to automatically add that. There's also, I have a feeling here, I'm not sure, like when this goes through the process and it fails, the sad path, we're just returning false at the end here. I have a feeling that it will just render, it will either break from this false, or it'll render the update thing and say your card has successfully changed.
Okay.
So I think that for the existing thing, that we should have the sad path in there. So that would be, the sad path would be the immediate thing, I think, to clear up, to add that test and simulate some sort of error, so that user gets a response that's like, I think at the moment we're only putting the error message into the log. We're not showing it to the user. Maybe we shouldn't show it to the user, but that's the thing to look at, I think.
Right.
I mean, the other thing is about the efficiency of, is it more efficient to work in a pair? Is it better to split and work on separate tasks? I guess if you're interested in looking at this, that's good to look at together tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have? I mean, by all means, tell me if there's different directions that you think things should be going in, or we should be focusing on.
Well, not really. I mean, I just feel like we sometimes I don't know. It's interesting. All the different projects we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, Monday it's one thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wednesday it's totally different.
Right.
We won't get back to that other thing till next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I concur.
We're like a 2-man team trying to run like 5 different projects.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and yeah, maybe it would be much better if we focused on one thing to the exclusion of other things. Indeed. Yeah. I mean, I have an idea about getting, like adjusting the meeting on Friday, like so that we don't spend an hour. I don't know, like I'm sort of thinking like we don't need to spend that hour on Friday all going through tickets. Like we could just do like voting on tickets like independently of that, like asynchronously.
Right.
And then we could just basically have, like we used to have at the very beginning of local support, we just like website one, right? We do the Scrum on Friday, get Raul, whoever in there and say, look, the Friday Scrum, that's the one we're going to check in. If there's anything that people are particularly blocked on that needs to be resolved, we do that. And, we make we just successfully done a kind of asynchronous voting on a story in local support. And it makes me think that we could basically remove that Friday meeting and we could actually get a proper day's work done on Friday in terms of coding if we structure it a little bit differently.
Right. The other thing is with the time that we're spending on project scope, right?
Right.
It's great if we create a microservice out of it.
Right.
What I guess from your perspective is what would be even greater is if somehow, like Armando was saying, he wants to try and convince Berkeley to share money with you.
Yeah. Well, adventures, yeah.
That came through, and there was some significant funding source coming out of the MOOC.
Yeah, totally. Yes, indeed. And so, the interesting thing about, I think there's definitely a danger of being focused on too many different things. There's also, again, to the extent that we have a microservices architecture, then, each day we might be working on different microservices. So like one day it's Agilebot, but
I mean, certain, in like a company, normally people own a microservice,
Right. And that,
I own this microservice and I work on this most of the time.
Yeah. Well, and that would be, that would be a nice place to get to, where we had enough people and resources. But yes, absolutely. I mean, the reason to want to support the project scope is that, and for the Berkeley class, for Armando, which is a bit of a diversion, is about convincing him that we're ready to have something like project scope that would support a fully online project class, which of course was always the whole reason I started Adventures in the first place. And and basically the idea is that next year the MOOCs become available all the time. in a kind of like continually running thing, and that there's profit share without adventures from that and the project course and so on. And so, yeah, that would be a. Of course, then there's like, when we get to the point, how much actual income would there be? I don't know. There's lots of people, talk excitedly about the project scope course. I mean, there is, edX is like pointed out that the course is in the top 20 earners for all edX courses over time, which is why they're very keen for it to become self-paced and so on and so forth. So, it's a complex puzzle. Yeah. Anyway, I should do some like admin clear up stuff. But yeah, well, great to get those tests wrapped on the Agile bot. It's good that that's all working. Apologies if my questioning of the options is comes across as negative.
I mean, it's just I don't know. So.
Yeah, let's see.
All right.
Okay, bye for now.